How's it going, everyone? Getting Nick on the IG Live right now. Cool. Thank you all for tuning in. Hey, what's up, Nick?
Greetings, brother. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Just going to get my camera set up proper here. What are you smoking on right now, dude?
I just rolled up some of this secret cookies times Kush Mints.
Whoa, that sounds like a mean cross.
It's anisey, bro. It has that that anise flavor that I love so much. It like kind of flow to a lot of people that know that, that strain flow.
Oh yeah,
that flavor in this one.
That was DJ Shorts, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I used to buy Flow back at when I was a medical patient in Boulder ages ago. It's like one of the best daytime strains. I love it.
You get like I feel like you get a lot of that anise taste from the Durban that came from the cookies. It's bringing some of that back.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm probably going to say this about 10 times throughout the course of the broadcast here. We've got legendary hash maker Nikka T with us, founder of Essential Extracts. I believe the first licensed and approved solventless specific lab in the world. Is that right?
Yeah. As far as the regulations go in the United States, the first tax-paying hash company. So.
Tax-paying. Okay, that's a good distinction. So, super excited to have Nick on the show today. We're going to be doing a mix of answering some questions, but I've also got a lot of great questions for you, Nick. We go back a little ways, shot some awesome videos back in the day. We're just really focused on educating and talking about solventless. I mean, Nick, how long have you been making hash for? For everyone who's tuning in, give us a little background about, how'd you get into it? Why'd you get into it?
Yeah, so I'm blessed to have grown up in the Bay Area, Northern California, where cannabis was extremely prevalent upon my upbringing. So, ever since I can remember, ganja's been around. I think I remember smoking my first spliff with a German foreign exchange student when I was old. And after that, I wanted to know how to make the hash, So, as a teenager, I remember driving up to Mendo in Humboldt and picking up trim and material to process into bubble hash. As far as growing up in Northern California, bubble hash was really, really prevalent. Not a lot of places throughout the world could you get bubble hash. There was isolator in Europe, but then other than that, a lot of the water hash that was being produced out of Northern California.
So you were a part of that whole original wave of bubble hash, ice water hash makers out in NorCal, and then you came out to Colorado in the mid-2010s. What prompted the move? Actually,
I originally moved to Colorado in 2001.
Oh, a lot longer before.
Boulder, so I think we shared a little bit of time at CU Boulder together.
CU snowboard team, shout out.
So originally I moved to Colorado in 2001, and it's because I actually fell in love with the snow, and I wanted to find a college that had a good psychology department that was also near the snow, because I'm a snowboarder. First, coming out to Colorado, I brought some of that, technology of making water hash in Northern California out to my Colorado house and started making hash, during college. And really honing in on my skills at that point in time. I started traveling to Amsterdam and learned a lot of oral tradition from Mila James, the hash queen. From there, we've just really been trying to control variables and produce the best quality product possible, man.
Dude, that's awesome. So you've been at it not only a long time. What prompted Essential Extracts? When did that come into your mind? When did that all get started?
2009. 2009 is when Essential Extracts was thought up. By 2010, we were licensed. We were an LLC licensed entity in the state of Colorado. It's just crazy. Still to this day, I'm so blessed to retain that name because I feel like it's such a powerful name, Essential Extracts, especially as we move into this Rona situation and cannabis is essential. We've been essential, so it's a trip, and even looking back at my first logo designs back in 2009, to where we're at today, not much has changed. And it's almost like I knew about rosin, you know, in 2009 when I made this first logo to almost look like a press.
The prophecy.
Yeah, it's really a trip, man. It's really a trip to see how far we've come.
Dude, that's awesome. Super excited to have you on today. Thank you, everyone who's tuning in. If you've got some questions that you want to ask us, go ahead, open up the question box at the bottom, and we will start going through some of those. It's a lot easier to answer them when people ask them through the prompt. Going through the comments that are going through the feed, you know, that's a little more difficult. So we're just going to be chatting about hash today. What are you up to these days? I know you've been world traveling, making hash all over the place. What are you seeing out there?
Man, it's really, really cool to get a peek into everyone else's lab in these last 2 years. Like you said, I've traveled all around the world. I've spent a lot of time in Spain. I've seen some labs and helped build out some labs in Jamaica. Processing in Canada. I mean, you name it. It's been a blessing to really get to see what other people are doing, you know. And I've been stuck in my own lab for a decade straight, working on our own R&D. But it was really, really cool to travel the world and see what other cultivars people are running and how, you know, just the little differences that we see, you know, as on my travels, even just from the power, you know, the power grids in Spain compared to the power out here, and learning, you know, how to, you know, convert the power and use different adapters and stuff like that. Because it's not really just hash making anymore. A lot of it is equipment and the technology and the environment that you're playing in. So it's giving me, you know, a lot more knowledge just by playing in all these different environments throughout the world.
So when you were in Spain for a while, because I know you've done a couple stints out there making hash with a bunch of famous European hash makers and just really seeing what's going on. What's different between, you know, what's going on here in the States and what's going on over in Europe?
Well, first and foremost, let's big up Europe for like really pushing water extraction, you know, isolator,
awesome,
ice, because they were really the, you know, the trendsetters in that game. I've just kind of followed suit and played with my own variables and, you know, kind of created our own little variations on the product. But the cool thing about Europe is Europe has this access to pheno hunting that we don't see too much out here on the level that we see in Europe. We're seeing them plot, you know, millions of seeds in Morocco and taking some of those, you know, pheno selections to the market in Spain. So I think that's one of the coolest things that I personally have seen is the ability to really, really pheno hunt on a large level and find those cultivars that are crushing for hash. You know, one of the guys that I always like to big up is La Sagrada and that Barbara Bud pheno that Premier found. It's just something special. I mean, that was the first time I saw guys doing whipped melt, you know, not even rosining the melt because they were getting such a clean product. And a lot of that has to do with the cultivar. So, you know, the pheno hunting that's going on in Europe is pretty rad. And they're just pushing the boundaries. You know, they're pushing it just as hard as we're pushing it here in the United States. And it's cool to see because 4 years ago in Spain, it wasn't nearly what it is today. And they're just progressing so fast right now.
So, okay. So that's cool. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot more going on there than some of us realize. And I know you've been going to cannabis for a while, and it seems like that's where everyone is really connecting over there. And then it all kind of blew up with the COVID situation this year.
Yeah, you know, the off-cannabis events are really, really key. That's kind of where Masters of Rosin came into play. You know, Spain just treats me really, really well. I'm just blessed to be, you know, to have a second home out there.
Yeah, I'm sure the food and the hash are on point in Spain.
What I live for these days, man, is terps.
Terps. That's awesome. I'm going to go ahead. We're going to go through a couple questions here, and then I've got some more for you. So pop this one up. Advice to a beginner hash maker. So this was one I was planning on asking you anyway, you know, for people that are tuning in, that are making hash, people that are just getting started, what advice for you have for them to, you know, get into the game and be successful?
Yeah, first of all, take initiative. You know, industry, even though I'm talking about being in it for over a decade now, this industry is still brand new. There's emerging markets everywhere throughout the world now. Take initiative, take the power into your own hands, because if you're not pushing the movement forward, who's going to push it forward? You know, so something I really recommend to people just trying to get into the industry is, you know, putting yourself out there, you know, bringing up new tech and just trying new things. Because if you come up with something brand new that some of us haven't played with before, we're going to want to talk to you. You know, we're going to want to learn. I'm into learning just as much as I am teaching. So
that's awesome. And I know that I don't know who was technically the first person to start doing solventless sauce and diamonds, but you guys had to be among the first, if not the first. I mean, I remember early on when we started doing some videos with you guys, we went over to the lab and, you know, you had done some mechanical separations and separated off some terps and we're making some diamonds. Was that just part of the R&D process, or, you know, when you guys were doing some of your own R&D, you know, how'd you get into that?
No, we were definitely not the first. We might have been, you know, one of the first to really make it commercially available.
Okay, good distinction.
Really what we pride ourselves on is, you know, scaling up a lot of these technologies and bringing them to the forefront and bringing them to the people via, you know, regulated routes. But, you know, the cool thing about me being able to travel around the world is I think I actually saw the very first mechanically separated THCA, and this was before they even had test results on it. So these guys were like, yeah, it's THCA, and I'm like, where's the test results? I don't really believe it. Me being able to travel allowed me to see things like that. I then like bring this idea back to Samwise Ganji, who was our extractor in the lab, and I'm like, bro, I just seen this crazy fucking white powder stuff. What is this? Have you heard of this? And he starts doing his, you know, research and stuff, and then we just started playing in the lab, and that's how a lot of this has come up. I really don't claim to be the first.
Sure.
Do a lot of this. You know, water hash has been around for generations and centuries, you know. But we just really try and hone in the variables and being able to work in this regulated environment with, you know, the ability to control temperature and humidity and write everything down and keep track of all the SOPs has really allowed us to excel and push this industry further, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'd say, you know, it's really refreshing to talk to you and, you know, your honesty about the growth of the industry and where it came from. I just feel like so many hash makers that you can see online on YouTube, you know, they're all about claiming credit and being the first to this and the first to that. But it sounds like you take a little bit of a different approach. You know, you're all about learning and trying to see what's coming next. 100%,
man. I'm still learning every day, bro. And that's the coolest thing about this solventless community. There's really no peak to what we can do and what we can learn and, you know, what we can create. 5 years ago, we didn't think separating THCA was possible. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I was working in a hot barn, you know, and making black, mildewy smelling goop. So, you know, we all came from somewhere, and I think all of us still have a lot to learn.
Yeah. So on that, where do you think the industry is headed right now with solventless? Like, where do you see solventless going in the next year, the next couple years? I mean, what's the future outlook what is the future outlook in your eyes?
I really think, well, number one, what we've seen a huge trend in the last 5 years, I think I actually wrote that little section in one of Ed Rosenthal's books about 5 years ago about the heavy hitters of hash.
I know that article.
Trend of finding specific cultivars that work for specific processes. So first and foremost, allocations are huge. You know, some cultivars, some strains don't perform well in water hash. Some strains don't perform well with hydrocarbons in reality. So really finding the correct allocations for the strains that we're growing is going to be huge. And from that is where we're going to really be able to devise, you know, what strains are going to help with what, you know, needs we have, whether that be ailments, whether that means finding strains that have really, really high THC to then create THCA from that as an end product. So I think that, you know, rather than, you know, trying to manipulate all the different cannabinoids, you know, and separate everything like they're doing in the hydrocarbon world right now, I think we should, as a solventless community, be focusing on that input, because that's what's going to create the end product, really.
Yeah. So who are some, genetic companies, some other hash makers that you're a fan of right now? Who do you think is out there pushing the boundaries in solventless? I'm sure the list is almost too long to, it's too long, but who are some of your top people that you follow and that you get inspiration from?
Oh man. I still get inspiration every day from Mila. She is still charging the fucking world, spreading what, I learned from her almost 20 years ago now.
That's awesome.
And, she's a huge inspiration in my life. Just seeing her positive posts every single day, and her comments and stuff on all of our hash makers posts. It's cool to see her just still charging. All my European family, as we mentioned, is just crushing. La Sagrada, HQ, my brethren Slight, Doc Hayes over there and his wife. It's a power couple right there, just crushing out fire out there. And a lot of the breeders I'm really looking up to right now. Everyone from Oni Seeds to Third Gen to Mike from Exotic Genetics, from, you name it. There's so many different breeders out there that are focusing on breeding for hash production. So big up the breeders each and every time, because that's really the future, is finding those strains that do what we want them to do, whether it's an appearance thing, whether it's a cannabinoid profile thing. The breeders, it starts with the seed, man.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And, there's so many good geneticists out there, so many good people trying to make crosses out of solventless. I would highly encourage everyone who's tuned in now, follow as many influential hash makers as you can, because you'd be surprised how much knowledge gets dropped on Instagram. And I'm sure most of the people who are tuned in right now are all on top of that, but, it doesn't hurt to expand your follow list. I am going to sprinkle it in with a couple questions here, because you've got as much knowledge as just about anyone in the hash game. What is the best way to store live hash rosin? What's your take on this?
If it's fresh pressed, if you're storing it for a long period of time, I recommend the freezer. If it's fresh pressed and you're trying to consume it, in the next couple of days, a wine cooler is probably that brings the temperature down but doesn't have the humidity levels that a refrigerator has. In reality, I've really been liking some of this pressure tech or some of the jar tech for shelf stability, because after you've kind of done that, a lot of these different styles of tech with pressure and temperature, you're able to see a lot more shelf stability, and you don't have to keep that product in the refrigerator or the freezer. I've had some of this jar tech that I've been playing with just sitting out here in my living room in ambient temperature, and it has not changed one bit. So that's really the advantage I see to the jar tech over the fresh pressed.
Okay. Well, that's a great question, and something I definitely wanted to dig into a little bit more. And every time we've done an IG Live, we've had about 10 questions about jar tech. It's a topic right now that everyone is learning about, trying to learn about. And I think something you just touched on, I'd really love to dig in as well, is, shelf stability. When we're talking about products, selling a product that's consistent, and having a product that can stay the right consistency for a while without needing special conditions. Walk us through jar tech a little bit. Have you been playing with that for a while? What's your take on jar tech?
It's really cool because jar tech really kind of came to fruition about 2 years ago, as I was really touching the road, as I was getting out of my lab that I was in 24/7 and starting to get into other people's labs. And so I kind of got to learn jar tech on the road and seeing everyone's different techniques, as far as temperature, as far as duration, et cetera, et cetera. So I've been kind of in an interesting position where I haven't gotten to really hunker down in my own lab as much as I'd like to in the last couple of years, but I've had the experience of seeing what everyone else is doing throughout the world. So I got to play with some jar tech in Spain, at the HQ lab with Slight. I got to play with a little bit with La Sagrada. And now, just in this last couple months, during this interesting time, I've been able to get back into my own R&D lab and start to play again.
Awesome.
But I still have a lot to learn myself with the jar tech. I'm just starting to delve into it, you could say.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So it sounds like you've seen how it can be done right. And you're saying that, what you've seen some of these other hash makers when they're, using jar tech, that they are getting some shelf stability that's, pretty high end and really able to make that consistent product.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any change. If you're doing the jar tech right, it's really, really cool to see, the shelf stability. Yeah, plain and simple. That's the main difference that I'm seeing between fresh pressed and jar tech.
Gotcha. That's awesome. So for everyone who's tuned in right now, like I said at the beginning, going to do this shout out just a couple times so everyone knows what's up. We got legendary hash maker Nikka T with us today. This video will be up on YouTube probably early next week. So anyone who's tuning in at the middle, didn't catch the beginning, just tuning in now, you'll be able to go back and watch the full thing. We'll also have it up on our Instagram to watch the whole thing when we're done here. Got about another 25 minutes left. We're just going through some questions and talking with Nick about hash washing and solventless. So what are some strains that you've been really liking lately? Do you have any, recent modern winners that you've gotten to wash, press, both?
Yeah, man, so many. Fuck. Every time somebody asks me this question, I go to like my personal favorite. And I've really, really been liking these lemon terpenes where we're actually finding viability. So let's back it up 10 years ago.
Okay.
And there was this strain called Lemon G that came out of Ohio.
Ohio, okay.
I loved the strain's terpenes. It was like the first time I really got to experience these piercing lemon rind terpenes rather than like the super lemon haze, lemon cleaner terpenes, which people called lemons for years. As soon as I found that Lemon G, I was like, whoa, this is the lemon I've been looking for. Since that Lemon G, there's now been, the resurgence of the lemon tree or the Oregon lemons or whatever that, came from originally. And that one yielded a little bit better in water hash. So sorry, I'm skipping ahead a little bit. Lemon G, okay. Super airy. It created these big colas that never really looked that great in flower form and didn't wash well in water hash. Fast forward, 5-6 years or so, and we're seeing the lemon tree. It yielded a little bit better in water hash, but still wasn't the most viable for water extraction.
Gotcha.
Just in the last couple of years, we've been finding some strains, that have that lemon terp profile that also do some washes. So, yeah, those are the ones that I'm looking for right now. Those are some of my favorites. I also just keep falling back on the chem lines. The chem lines just do really, really well for us as far as stability, as far as yield, as far as terpenes, as far as cannabinoid profile. It's just a nice all-around washer. And then, keep going on those citrus type terpenes. A lot of these orange flavors and tangerine flavors. We've been finding washers with like the Tropicana cookies, all the stuff from Oni.
Purple hash.
Some really, really cool stuff out there. People are saying papaya in the feed, and it's funny, we selected those papaya washers back in 2011, 2012. That's a big strain in the wash game right now. It's not like my favorite thing, because I'm looking for things that I really like in flower form and in hash form. And the flowers of papaya just don't have the oil content that I'm looking for.
Yeah, so this is a great question for you. When you're selecting a strain that you're hoping to wash, get a good yield out of, start working with it, do you do any test washes? Is it a visual inspection? I mean, before you go all in and commit to washing pounds of fresh frozen, what's your selection process to try and find a winner?
That's an amazing question. And I I feel like I answer it almost every day now, but
well, thank you for answering it again for us here.
I love talking about it. So first and foremost, we really start from the cultivation. We really, want to help consult with our cultivation to start with those, washers to begin with. We also, help to teach, the cultivation to not touch the plants. It's a big part of it. I've seen a lot of people going in there and just manhandling the plants in the growing process and in the harvesting process. Just be really, really gentle. Now, to sidestep that, I do want to set out, some plants aside so that I can actually touch them. Because that's a real big part of my selection, is going out into the field and not manhandling all the plants, but picking a specific plant and just feeling what those trichomes feel like, smelling them, getting a feel for the terp profile. And I can really devise a lot by the feel. I like to scope the trichomes as well and look at the density of trichomes on the plant, how many trichomes there are actually. You can see a little bit of the structure of the trichomes with the scope, but we really get 85% of, if I know it's a wash or not, it's feeling it. And you're going to feel differences like greasiness, you're going to feel tackiness, you might feel sandy and grittiness. And so we look for a lot of those different features. Okay,
so you've got a pretty artisan level selection process before you're going to wash. Out of curiosity, what are some strains that you found or some lineages that just don't play super nice with ice water hash? Are there any that people on here should, maybe cautiously avoid or, look a little more closely at before they commit to a big wash?
I always use the example of Blue Dream. For a lot of people, that strain is, over and they're tired of seeing it and hearing it. In reality, that strain is still being sold and being grown throughout the world. Whether I like it, whether you like it, whether we like it or not. But that strain, notoriously, and the cut that's going around that yields 2+ pounds of light in flower form, just does not yield in water hash form. We're seeing like less than 3% yields, and that's variable. There's some cuts of Blue Dream out there that I've seen crush. So, everything is to be taken with a grain of salt. But for the most part, that Blue Dream is not going to do the numbers you want to see in water hash, but you allocate it to flowers, you allocate it to BHO, and it's going to do amazing numbers. 20+% yields in BHO compared to 3% or less in water hash. Along those lines, I really don't recommend people washing most haze cuts. A few things, we found phenos of Ghost Train haze that did great numbers for us. So there's always going to be those outliers, but most of the time, hazes are just not going to be the best washers.
Okay. No, that's awesome advice. And, one thing that a lot of our customers ask us is kind of like, how do I make sure I'm washing stuff that's going to yield what I need it to yield? And, we always like to tell them, before you go all in on pounds and pounds and pounds, maybe just do a small one before you really make that commitment and end up having some crazy price per gram, production cost. So
you can go back to the old school mason jar tech. Is what I used to do. I literally have this clear vision of me doing it in my kitchen in Boulder, Colorado in 2004, just playing around and shaking up jars of ice water with a little bit of plant material, and you can really see the trichomes fall. And you can get a good idea of that, if that strain is going to wash for you or not. Just doing a small, ounce fresh frozen mason jar ice water tech.
Shake it up.
Sink. Trichomes will always sink. Plant matter will always rise to the top, whether you're talking about utilizing bags of separation or gravity.
No, that's awesome. And, as you were talking about that, we had a couple people comment that exact same thing. Shout out to Cuban. I think Giddy Up was in here. We've got some real other high-level hash makers tuning in. So thank you all for joining us. We are hyped to have you here. I'm going to go through. We've gotten a bunch of questions. We probably won't get to all of these because so many came through. But if you got a question that didn't get answered here, shoot us a DM. We'd love to try and help you out. So Pressington's, put you on the spot a little bit. What's the largest yield you've had from frozen material? What's your yield range look like?
No mute button. Sorry, I'm coughing.
Oh, no. Enjoying some fine product.
the largest yields we saw in my personal lab in Colorado were upwards of 8%, a little over 8%, and that's on our ChemD OG.
Nice.
However, I saw upwards of 9% doing some collaborations over at the Field Extracts Lab in San Francisco.
Yes.
The Gorilla Princess. It just wasn't my profile, so we ended up not using it in the collaboration. But that was a collab between Skittles, I believe, and Field Extracts that released that. But I happened to be there doing some of the test washes, and the thing was throwing some numbers. So, yeah.
That's awesome. We you hear a lot of things. A lot of people want to throw out big numbers about how they're, hash wash this or it dumped that. 9% is massive. The guy who asked this question, Pressington's, he sent us a message saying that he checked the math 3 times and was looking at around an 11% on one of his that he washed, which, that's like a Guinness World Book of Records fish coming out of the lake.
Send me that fucking cut, bro.
Yeah. All right, Pressingtons. Yeah, you might have to keep that one under wraps. Just another quick one that came through here in the feed, because I think that you're, tapped in a lot more than I am. Some of these. What are some books you recommend for anyone who's trying to learn about hash? You got any authors? Ed Rosenthal. Who should people be looking for? What kind of book materials out there that's worth buying?
Oh man, why am I always Robert Connell Clark? Take a look at anything that Robert Connell Clark has written. He's an OG. He's been studying trichomes for a lot longer than I have. Robert Connell Clark. Ed Rosenthal has, a lot of the Beyond Buds and that series and stuff. He's getting really a lot more into depth. I'm trying to think of other books, actual, hard copy books that are out there. I don't know. Check out Robert Connell Clark. That's my OG as far as hashish. Check out the book Hashish, just to get some background.
Awesome. All right, Kevin, check that out. I'm about to order a copy myself because I'm always trying to learn too, and I haven't really heard of him or that book. So that sounds like an awesome one. And one other quick one that came in here. Someone was asking, how are yields so low with such good starting material? This is Chris 1111. A quick one here. We're talking about 9%, 10%. We're talking about a fresh frozen wet weight to a dried material weight. So your fresh frozen, we've heard hash makers tell us anything from 3 times to 5 times your weight of a fresh frozen pound. That's water weight. So, you take that 8%, that 9%, that 5%, whatever it is, multiply that by, would you say 3, 4? What's your gut on that?
We consistently have seen 75% to 80% water weight in everything we've ran for the last decade, and we have numbers on it. And we've helped consult the Department of Revenue to put in a fresh frozen button into metric. 5-6 years ago on my birthday, whenever that was. We have a lot of data showing that percentage of water weight. And it'll vary a little bit depending on when the last time you watered, when the last time the cultivator watered the plants, etc. How much water weight that plant was carrying. But yeah, 75 to 80%. So, yeah.
So Chris, just so you know, take that number, multiply it by 4. You'll have something that's a little bit more realistic out the other end. So, okay, cool. Go through a couple more questions here. Got a little bit of time left. Let's see. What do we got? Cool. All right. Here's a good one. Hand or machine wash for starters. A lot of options out there. I know that you've done a whole bunch of both. What's your take on the current state of machine washing versus hand washing? This is a hot topic.
Well, yeah. This is an interesting one. I've had great luck doing both.
Awesome.
We move into the fully regulated industry, with the health department, and the fire department, and having to have UL listings on all of the machinery that's in these licensed facilities. A lot of the plastic washing machines are going away. In licensed facilities, unless you have one of these brand new agitators that are coming to market every day now, new companies are coming out with things. unless you have a new UL listed, fully functioning insulated agitator, I think hand washing is kind of the way of the future and the way to go right now.
So with hand washing, one thing that we've heard and seen quite a bit of is, doing multiple washes and having a hand wash to really be able to control whether you're trying to make melt, you're just going for full spectrum. That's really your end product is going to dictate how you wash, or is it the other way around? You do your wash and then you find out what it gives you, or is it both?
It's going to be a little of both, but I'm always going to think about the end product, what the consumer, what the cultivator, whoever's giving me that product, whatever it's supposed to be as far as the end product, that's what I'm going to be thinking about from the beginning. As far as how many bags I'm using, as far as how much I'm washing, how many runs I'm doing, how I'm separating that out, allocating the time. Because as we move, if there's a client that just wants rosin, we're going to agitate a little bit differently. We're going to separate a little bit differently than if we were trying to create the fullest melt possible.
Okay, so different end game if you're just making a full spectrum rosin product versus if you're trying to get that melt out the door.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But everything, whether you're talking about creating melt or creating rosin, temperature and humidity control is huge. Environmental control is just big for us. The second your lab or your facility or your home goes above 65 degrees, we've mentioned that temperature for years now, you're going to start seeing, it harder to separate the glands properly, harder to pull all the moisture out before you either go into your freeze dryer, before you do your sieve method, before you do your microplane method, whatever method you're utilizing. We really just push environmental control over everything.
So I remember, the handful of times we went back to your lab, in the winter, no heat, everyone's wearing winter coats. So what do you think are the most important environmental controls? I mean, is it making sure your water's, reverse osmosis? Is it the temperature? Is it all of it? I mean, one of the questions we got asked that this, ties together pretty nicely is, what tips or tricks for a beginner who's pressing, if you're trying to control your environment, what do you really need to be thinking about?
Temperature environment is the first thing, because if you can't work in an environment that's below 65 degrees, I wouldn't recommend doing it. Yeah, headache. It's seriously going to be a headache to wash, especially if you're working with high quality material. If you're working with lower quality material, it's going to be a little easier for you and you won't witness these same headaches. But I think all of our goal right now is to create the highest quality possible. And if you can't control your temperature, first and foremost, I would recommend doing it somewhere else.
Okay, so the margin for error with premium quality starting material is razor thin, whereas if you're working with, mids, for lack of a better term, you can definitely get away with a lot more with your environment.
Yeah, because, but you're also not going to, everyone keeps saying, how do I get those colors? How do I get that consistency you're getting? You're not going to see that working with mids. So,
good point. You can only make so much with material that's not primo.
Yeah.
So how would you answer this for someone who's a beginner washing and pressing? I mean, what are just some high level tips and tricks?
Temperature and humidity control, sterilizing your environment. If you have animals in the area that you're making hash, it's not a good idea. Hash is really, really sticky. So anything from your environment, even the humidity in your environment, will get sucked into that hash. So temperature, humidity, sterilization, really sterilize all of your equipment and all of your surroundings before you even break out any material is what I really recommend. After you've talked about the actual temperature and humidity of your environment, sterility is huge on my list.
So cleanliness is absolutely critical. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Why? Because, if you got dust, if you've got things floating around in your lab, that's going to end up in your hash, and that's not what people want to smoke.
Nope. And, taking all of these macro images and working with all these photographers, you really get to see everything, you know, in your hash. So highly recommend sterilizing everything in your environment. Your washing machine, if you're going to use a washing machine, your bags, if you're going to use bags, and your counter space, your floors even. Because guess what? Even if you never touch the bottom of your bag to the floor, the bottom of your bucket or your washing vesicle or your, you know, whatever you're separating in is going to be on the ground. So just clean the floors, clean the countertops. Make sure your environment's sterile.
Yeah. Yep. Well said. So for everyone who's tuning in and may have missed the beginning of that, if you want a pro tip that doesn't get brought up all that often, it's, you know, the material's big, the temperature's big, humidity's big. Make sure your environment is crystal clean, because otherwise that's just going to end up in your hash, and that is no bueno. You don't want a bunch of cat hair floating around getting into your plants or anything. So we've got about 4 minutes left here. Would love to have you back on the show in the future, Nick. I mean, love hearing what you've been up to. Go through another question, and then I'd love to, you know, finish it off with whatever you want to talk about. So let's go with this. This is a great one. Can post-processing, I think he meant to say add instead of and value, but can post-processing add value to a product? I think I know the answer, but I'm going to let you take it away.
We've been doing it for years. There's a lot of different things you can do with that material afterwards that can create viability, larger margins, and a slew of other products that you can release under your brand.
What are some of your favorite, you know, solventless products that require some post-processing?
I mean, one of the easiest things to do that we've done for years, you know, and we've swayed away from that a little bit. We've kind of created a little bit more of a refined process. But easiest thing to do at your own home, post-processing, toss that chunk of, you know, fresh frozen material after you've washed it in with some coconut oil. Boil off the water, strain out the material, make some capsules.
Yeah, okay. So that's something I think a lot of hash makers are really taking advantage of, and that some people are just starting to wake up to at home is, you know, multiple washes and using all parts of the buffalo, as it were, to get, you know, you got your primo, you got your full spec or your mid, and that could be a super high-end product, and then having more of your food grade at the end of your wash. Is that what you guys are typically doing, you know, multiple washes, multiple products?
Yeah, multiple washes for sure. You know, it just depends on the end goal. 100% end goal dictates a lot of that.
Awesome. Cool. So got a couple minutes left here for everyone who's tuning in. This video will be up on YouTube soon. It will also be available on our page, so you can watch it for the next 24 hours. And then Alex, who, Nick, you remember, came in the lab, he's going to be cutting this up, editing it, and we will get the full transcript so people can watch and get the whole thing. So with the couple minutes we've got left, I mean, for everyone who's tuned in, what would you like to share? What should people be thinking about? What's going on in your world?
Man, I just keep thinking genetics. You know, right now is a great time, you know, while everyone's locked down, pop seeds, find cleanups, find something unique. You can come up real fast if you find a big washer that has a unique turf profile. So, yeah. That's that right now is at the seed.
No, that's awesome. So silver lining here is if you got some extra time inside right now, do some pheno hunting, see if you can find some winners. I mean, you know, Mac has made the rounds, GMO making the rounds. There's just these strains, a lot of cookies and cream. You know, there's some of these strains that are just legendary for ice water hash, and now everyone's running them. So cool. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Nick, great to see you again. Glad you're doing so well. It's awesome to hear about your travels. We'll definitely have you back on. You know, the appetite for solventless education is pretty much unlimited. So thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me. Big up all the family in the feed. I haven't even had a chance to say give thanks, but Miss Radry for Edu, Blue Ice Tech, Cuban, everyone, give thanks for watching. Thank you guys for having me. Much love and respect.
Cool. All right. Hey, have a great rest of your day, everybody. We will catch you in 2 weeks with Fox, and we'll be talking about CBD. So Thank you, guys. Talk to you soon.
Right on, brother. Much love.
Bye.